I want to start off with where the We Make Change journey started. And for those who don't know, the We Make Change journey really started when I myself wanted to use my skills for good, but didn't know how I could. As someone who wanted to volunteer, it was so hard to find an opportunity that supported my causes, used my skills, and fit with my schedule. And one of the things I realized is that there were so many other people who faced that same problem. And it just so happened that after a bit of time, I actually started to work in the social enterprise sector myself. And I worked with so many amazing social entrepreneurs and saw that they found it really hard to find people with the skills they need to grow their impact. So the entire idea behind We Make Change is that if we could enable anyone anywhere to use their skills to support the causes they care about, that we could link those individuals with those social enterprises and together help address some of the biggest challenges the world faces today. And so 3 years on from that idea, we've now built a global movement of more than 25,000 change makers and more than 450 social enterprises who we help to connect with volunteers all across the world. And it just so happens that along the We Make Change journey, we've actually and still do have our volunteer team leading the entire organization. And that's one of the key reasons why we're giving this webinar today, because we have gone through a process of learning and building our own volunteer team to helping other social enterprises to do the same as well. Now, before the 5 steps, there are 3 stats that I think you all should know. And it comes from this thing where people actually think, well, firstly, are there even people who are interested in supporting my cause as a social entrepreneur? Well, from statistics from a Stanford research study, 90% of people actually want to volunteer, but only 25% of people actually do. And there are a whole range of reasons as to why there is that gap between the 25% and the 90%. But 2 of the key reasons come down to what social enterprises can specifically bring. And that is interesting opportunities that use people's actual professional skills that they want to develop. And secondly, to be able to volunteer in a flexible way, which enables them to do so while juggling a range of other responsibilities. And the other side is, well, you as social entrepreneurs, why do you actually want the support of volunteers? And if you're here, you probably know that. But actually, a recent World Economic Forum study of social entrepreneurs found that almost 2/3 of social entrepreneurs lack the time for the most basic things outside of their entrepreneurial activity. And as social entrepreneurs, for those of you who are here, you know that you often lack the time to be able to do all of the things you need to within your own enterprise, as well as in your own day-to-day life as well. And so those stats give a really good sense about how us as social entrepreneurs can really not only provide an opportunity for those people who want to volunteer but don't, but can also expand our own capacity to bring more to our own social enterprises, as well as avoiding things like burnout and some of the tendencies and struggles that come with running your own social enterprise as well. But if you're going to actually make the most of those volunteers and try to get some of those volunteers who are within that gap, is there are a few key steps that you can take. And these are the 5 key steps that I'm going to take you through today. Now, the first thing I want to say is that everything I'm going to say is obvious. What is amazing is how rarely each of these things are done well. And that's why you're not going to be blown away by anything that's going to be said. But if you can take away just a few key lessons from this webinar, I can guarantee you that you will not only have more volunteers who want to join your organization, but you can also make the most of their skills and give them the best experience possible, so that together we truly can have the biggest impact that we can make collectively as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these 5 steps relatively quickly with the key aspects of each one, starting with purpose. And the reason why I start off with purpose might seem strange to people, because it doesn't necessarily have anything directly to do with volunteers. But one of the key things is, as any organization, is that if you don't have a clear organizational purpose, you are not going to have people who feel inspired to support it. And whether you have a social enterprise or are thinking of starting one, or even a part of one, it's amazing to see how few organizations have a really clear set of guidelines as to why they exist, what they do, and how they do it. And if you can answer those three key questions, you suddenly have the clearest elevator pitch that you can make to any volunteer, any funder, any customer as you go along the way. And that's why the example that I give here is the one that we use at We Make Change. And I'll read it to give you a sense of how simple it is. So, We Make Change exists to give you the power to change the world. We connect social enterprises with the skilled volunteers they need to grow their impact. And we do that by providing a platform for individuals and employees to volunteer their skills to support social enterprises changing the world. Now, in 3 sentences, I've just explained what it will take some people 3 minutes to clarify about their own organization. And the reason we start with organizational purpose is because the first thing that a volunteer is going to see when they're considering working with your own organization is, what is your purpose? What are the challenges you help solve? And how do you help to solve them? Again, so that's why the key first building block is having a clear organizational purpose. Now, going on from there into something that will seem more familiar to people in relation to recruiting volunteers. Now, when it comes to recruitment, there are so many different aspects, but I've just broken it down into these 6 key things to consider. And I'm going to start by going through the top row, because this really is about recruiting passionate, skilled, and committed volunteers to your organization. And there are 3 first key things you can do to help that. The first thing is to really understand the skills that you need within your organization, and then use a role title that will actually entice people to apply. And you might think a role title is quite an insignificant thing, but actually, as social enterprises, as opposed to a lot of more traditional NGOs and nonprofits, is that we both have an opportunity and a tendency to offer role titles that actually work in a professional setting. So to give you an idea, within We Make Change, we have people who are marketing managers, project coordinators, chief operating officers. These are professional role titles which give people a real sense of ownership over their role, but also really entice them to actually apply as well. And the second thing is having a really clear set of responsibilities that people can understand when they apply. And I'll go through that in a bit more detail shortly as to how to set that out. And the final thing in that area is to give a clear indication of the time required for someone to do that role effectively. Now, we often say that actually ask for more time than you need, because often people will actually overemphasize and overestimate how much time they can give to your organization. So that's the first key thing about outlining the role within the organization itself. Now, on the second row below that is that you want to find a really simple way for skilled volunteers to apply to join your organization and for you to get the information that you need. We know what it's like. As soon as someone clicks on a page with the intent to potentially volunteer, they want to be able to do it as simply as possible. And related to that, when you actually get that information, you want to be able to review those applications according to 3 key attributes that we use, which are passion, ability, and time. The reason we use those, and in that order, is because without that passion behind your purpose, that volunteers will often not feel committed. The second thing is that, of course, they have to have the ability in the role to be able to perform it. And thirdly, they've got to have the time to actually make it happen. But again, without that passion, the ability and the time mean absolutely nothing. And then finally, when it comes to the interviewing part of recruitment, the key thing is to create a consistent set of interview questions that enable you to assess volunteers quickly and effectively. One of the things that, as we've interviewed so many people, and I personally have interviewed over 200 volunteers for our own organization, is that the more consistent you can be, the more you can understand about how each volunteer you interview relates to your own organization, and you can make sure that that interview process is as effective and time efficient as possible as well. Now, I could give an entire talk on just interviewing technique, but we're not going to do that. One of the things that I did want to take you through, and this is a very deliberate and a purposeful plug from the fact that we've done this so many times for so many different organizations is that the way that the We Make Change platform is set up is for you as an organization to be able to actually effectively articulate each of those aspects of the recruitment process. So when I talked about purpose, is that the way that We Make Change project pages are set up, which is what you can see here in bite-sized format, is that we start with that organizational purpose, and we even actually help organizations to sometimes craft it so it's as enticing as possible. And the second thing is we enable and actually encourage organizations to lay out the skills in that really easy, simple format, which shows both the role title, the responsibilities, and the time required, those different things that I went through. And again, our team reviews those things to make sure it fits those criteria. And then finally, people apply super simply through the application form, and they identify to you as a social entrepreneur as you receive the applications, why they actually want to join your project, that passion, things like their LinkedIn and their CV as to what specific skills that they have. And finally, they also indicate how much time they have to give. So the way that we've built the recruitment process for social enterprises looking to recruit volunteers on our platform is built entirely around those principles that I just went through. So again, that is a very deliberate plug, but it's for a purpose. And that is because that type of opportunity to try and actually recruit volunteers through a platform like ours, which is entirely for free, means that actually we can craft that entire experience for you as well. And again, manage that part as effectively as possible. So that's all about recruitment. Now I'm going to come on to the third part, which is around management. Again, this is a webinar in itself, but there are a few key principles that we often stick to and have found really effective with the over 400 organizations that we now support as well. And this is all built around giving volunteers a fun, flexible, and effective experience. And it starts with onboarding. So it's making your onboarding process into your team as quick, comprehensive, and consistent as possible. Again, consistency is key. And frankly, being more consistent in how you onboard enables you to do it in an even quicker fashion, which is more time effective for you as a social entrepreneur as well. Now, after you've got someone onboarded, it's really key that every volunteer has a clear set of tasks with agreed deliverables. It's really amazing how many individuals who will either run a social enterprise or engage with volunteers really don't give volunteers a key sense of what they're really there to do. And the more clear you can be with the tasks and the deliverables, the better the outcome will be. And when it comes to this part of the kind of volunteer experience, is that it's really key to work with your volunteers to collectively decide the deadlines that they're working towards. Because people are volunteering. They have a whole range of different requirements and responsibilities. So collectively deciding those deadlines can be crucial, and actually having them is the first step. Again, so many organizations don't have that. And again, if you have clear tasks with clear deadlines, you'll almost certainly get a good outcome with the specific work that you want. And then the next section, the 3 points below that, really comes to the sort of the internal infrastructure and ways that you engage with your volunteers almost on a day-to-day and week-by-week basis. And it starts with communication. And that means about making your communication responsive by using simple technology. For lots of us, we take some of this tech for granted, but again, lots of social enterprises either use this technology, but there's also quite a few that don't, or as effectively as possible. Now, there are 3 different forms of communication tech that we generally recommend, but of course there are others, and it depends on the context and country that you're working in as to what people are most comfortable with. But we highly recommend things like just simple WhatsApp group for small teams, teams of 3 to 5 people. But as soon as you get beyond that, we really highly recommend using things like Slack or Discord, depending on how tech savvy you are as an organization and your volunteers are as well. To give you an idea, within We Make Change, we've used Slack almost from the very beginning, and we then use Zoom for our meetings and things like that. Having those really simple forms of tech to communicate with your teams and expanding them as they grow is just amazingly both effective and efficient for you as a social entrepreneur, but also for the volunteers as well. That's why I would always recommend using those platforms. none of that communication by email, apart from for specific things. It's painful for everyone. So that's what we would definitely recommend. Now, when it comes to meetings, when we started with our own volunteer team, to give you an idea, it started with just about 4 of us and has eventually now grown into about 25, is that we'd all often have ad hoc meetings. So, oh, we need to discuss something here, we need to discuss something there, let's get a meeting here with different people. But one of the things that we realized is that actually, if you schedule regular meetings, you can keep people accountable and everybody on track. So that's why within the We Make Change team, we have a full team meeting on the first Wednesday of every month. And with individual teams, we either have weekly or bi-weekly meetings and catch-ups. And even with individuals, for example, I have weekly catch-ups with individuals, again, at scheduled regular times to make sure that we can be kept accountable and consistent. And the final thing about managing volunteers is that it's got to be fun. Like, one of the things that we believe that We Make Change is that you can only make change if you're going to have fun along the way. And so it's about creating that like fun and engaging experience, both for yourself and also for the volunteers as well. And I'll give you a few ideas about how you can do that in the next stage of the process, which is all about celebrating. So you've just think about it now, you've got that clear organizational purpose, you've recruited those volunteers, you're starting to manage them, they're all onboarded and doing really well. But now you want to celebrate the successes of those volunteers. And it's about doing this in a really like consistent and effective way. And I wanted to just show you a few examples of the things that we've seen be effective and that we actually use internally at We Make Change as well, because we think you can learn from it. The first thing is so obvious, it probably doesn't need to be said, but about giving your team shout outs on social media to publicly show your appreciation. We actually have lots of people in the We Make Change team who just really don't want to be celebrated publicly. So we give shout outs to those who do, but we also have an internal Celebrate team channel in our Slack, which is all about celebrating the successes of individuals or even specific teams as well for the achievements that they do. Again, it's a key way to keep people motivated and also show that you really do value the support that they're providing. And then the final part about celebrating your volunteers that we've just started is actually tracking anniversaries of people who join your team. Now, I'm super proud and also just so thankful that we are actually able to celebrate anniversaries of our team members. And even some of the people who made this today have been with our organization, not only for maybe 1 year, but sometimes even several years. And that's why we keep a track and a record of those anniversaries. And you might think on the first day that someone might not be with you for a year, but you better keep track of when they are so you can celebrate them for doing so. And it really gives everyone in the team a sense of, some of these small things you can do to show your appreciation for people who stick around for a long time. And then the final part, key step that I wanted to go through, and again, this stuff sounds blatantly obvious, but I'm telling you, you do this well and consistently, it really will reward you and your volunteers. And that's why the final step is about rewards. And we know what it's like as social entrepreneurs. You often can't provide the traditional peaks and rewards that companies give, whether it be amazing like lunches in a corporate cafe or providing even different aspects of things for individuals on a monetary basis. Just a lot of organizations in the social enterprise space can't afford to do that. But there are lots of things you can do either entirely for free or on a very limited budget, which can be as effective as possible. And everything I've been through just now and up to this point has been entirely for free as well. So cost is really not an excuse. And so one of the ways you can reward volunteers, firstly, is by promoting them. So promoting volunteers who excel in their position and show commitment to your cause. So we do that and have recently promoted one of our social media managers to become a marketing manager. It's a really small thing, you might think, but actually for someone in that position, it shows a huge amount of respect and gratitude for what they've done, and also something additional they can put on their CV. The second thing you do is actually provide awards. So give awards for exceptional contributions that your volunteers make and shout about them as much as you can. And we do that for people, for example, like our national presidents that we have in our communities, and even within our own internal team at the same time as well. And then finally, talk about providing reference letters. Now, the thing that you might think as a social entrepreneur, the last thing you want is for your volunteers to get a job if they're currently out of one. But for me, I think is if they've been volunteering as hard and as successfully as they have been, I do my best to give them the best opportunity I can to actually support them in getting a job. And that comes for me by providing things like reference letters if they're asked for. And one of the reasons why I do that and do it on a regular basis, again, it's a very small gesture, but it can mean so much and is a very small thing that can be done for a volunteer who has provided so much to you as an organization as well. And so those are the 5 key steps, but I just wanted to provide you with a key checklist of 5 things before we go as well. And one of the reasons why I want to do that is that if you go through each of those 5 key steps of the process, these 5 things each of you should have as social enterprises for your volunteers, and each volunteer should have. And that is clear set of roles and responsibilities, defined tasks and deadlines, simple and responsive communication, fun and engaging experience, and opportunities for growth. Now, if you can tick off each of those things for all of your volunteers, you are giving every volunteer exactly the experience they want, and I'm sure they'll be giving back to you the value that you really want to see from your volunteers and for your organization as well. And that's why I just want to end by giving a complete overview of those 5 steps again. Clear organizational purpose is where it starts, recruiting those passionate, skilled, committed volunteers, then giving volunteers a fun and effective experience, celebrating their successes and rewarding them as regularly as you can as well. Again, as I said at the beginning, nothing I have just said is going to blow your mind away. But if you have those 5 key steps, as simply put as that, you can give your volunteers an amazing experience and they'll give you one back as well.